Good to see you all. Kind of getting myself ready here for extended discussion. CW Jah discussion. Live number 31. We'll give as many people as are able a few minutes to join us, see that we're live, and then we'll get going. I have a good topic for us tonight. Good to see we got Betsy in the chat. Very nice. Good to see you, Betsy. As those of you who have watched prior shows know, we host these weekly live discussion shows, usually every Saturday, sometimes earlier, depending on where you are. I base my time references on where I am, which is Southern California, west coast of the United States. And it's about 7:10, almost 7:10 p.m. So across the United States, we have kind of a 3-hour time difference where people, for example, in New York or Florida, right now it's 10:10. So now they're a little more used to staying up late. You know, things happen a little later on the East Coast in some ways. But I try to make it as convenient for as many people, not just in the United States, but around the world. As I say, we're not like a huge group or big by any comparison with known Christian groups or other religions, but we're still, that doesn't make any difference, right? It doesn't make a difference from the Bible's perspective. The only thing that matters is truth. So we have a group of people, several hundred to several thousand at least, around the world, in many countries, who are interested in the same thing. Right? 3 things primarily above all, everything else, basically. Certainly, religious, but that's your whole life as far as we're concerned. So, in other words, we don't just practice one thing in our religious life and then discard it elsewhere. Now, we do try to adapt as Christians. We don't have to be so rigid or inflexible that we can't not make it uncomfortable for people to be around us, right? Even if we have standards, same with other people. They have standards, we understand their morals, different principles. There's always going to be a difference based on how people behave or what they think is good behavior or good practice. But most people, most adults understand if you're a rational, reasonably developed person, that not everybody has the same standards. Not everybody has the same requirements. Now, people react differently, but as Christian Witnesses of Jah, our main 3 beliefs are, number 1, the God of the Bible, whom we believe to be, of course, the God of all creation. This would be the same God that the Muslims believe in, although they, of course, refer to him as Allah. We refer to him as Yah or Jah in English, Yah'ol or Ja'ol in English. Many people are used to Jehovah or Yahweh. But the evidence actually supports, other than Jah, the form of the name in its 3 and 4 letter tetragrammaton forms. The pronunciation Ya'ol. I have a video playing on the front page of my CW JahTube channel right now that highlights recent evidence that goes all the way back to the 13th century BCE, like right after the time of Moses, right at the time when the people Moses freed from Egypt with God's aid, of course, entered the promised land and were doing things, including writing curses that Moses told them to do. And the 13th century find we have shows that at that time, right, the literally the people who were freed from Egypt and who survived the time in the wilderness, or the ones who were brought through the wilderness and then into the promised land after Moses died, but before he died, he gave them instructions on what to do. They were using the pronunciation Ya'ol. We know that because it's only 3 letters, Yod, He, Wa, no final He, which was used at times because it was used early in ancient times, early on is what I mean, as a vowel marker. Some Hebrew consonants were used as vowel markers to indicate the sound that you were, because they didn't have the Masoretic pointing system that developed later that performed, a similar but expanded function. So the different pronunciations, which I'll get into further, and which I've written about in my Jehovah's Witnesses Defended books, my 3 dissertation books, on my blog articles, Watching the Ministry, videos on this channel. I've talked about the forms in the Masoretic text, the Leningrad Codex, the Aleppo Codex. I've discussed the potential reasons for using a longer form like Yehovah, but it in no way even comes close to the evidence that supports Ya'ol for Yod He Wa and Yod He Wa He. Again, I talk to people often, and I'm going to be discussing this more, but I've already, in my view, presented more than enough evidence to show what the best and most likely pronunciation of the divine name is outside of Jah, right? And this isn't really all new. Some of it's new, like the part I'm playing on my channel right now. That's pretty new. And it's like the most significant, probably, right? Because you really can't get Yahweh or Yehovah from Yod-Heh-Wah. You need that final Hey, and you need it to be representing a consonant, basically, having a consonantal function. And the evidence doesn't support that, right? The evidence over a long period of time, a variety of different people, Jews, Christians, Greeks, pagans. If you want to follow people like Dr. Nehemiah Gordon and others, Watchtower people and others, because that makes you feel good. You know what makes me feel good? That the pronunciation I use, not only Jah, but Ya'ol, has the best available evidence by far, like not even close, right? Including evidence from the time, like within 100 years of Moses getting all the information from God in Exodus 3:14 about his name and Exodus 6, all of it. Yeah, they were saying Ya'ol, just like the Jews at Elephantine, just like Diodorus said they were saying, invoking their God, just like 4Q Leviticus B shows they were invoking God, and even just like people as late as Jerome said they invoke God. The Tetragrammaton, Yod-Heh-Wah, is pronounced Ya'ol. Jerome knew that. That doesn't prove it, but he's not an idiot, and that shows how late even that understanding was. And then you get into, even later evidence, another evidence that you just by far in its length and the proximity to actual biblical events, including 4Q Leviticus B, including Diodorus, including the Jews at Elephantine, right? It's right at the time of Cyrus and his son, and the Persians and the Egyptians and the Jews and the fort of the Jews that were guarding Elephantine at that time, and their correspondence with Jerusalem and all this stuff, right? Using Ya'ol all over the place. No one really thinks about that. It's strange to me. I guess I kind of understand. But see, for me, it's not about whether I want to know what I should be doing. I try to anyway, as uncomfortable as it might be. And at times it is. I want to know the right thing to do. So, you can, and this will kind of tie into what we're going to be discussing. If you saw the thumbnail, welcome everyone to CW Jah. Live discussion number 31. Got me, Betsy, we got Pib from Turkey. I think Betsy's in the United Arab Emirates. We'll give a few other people time to join us, and then we're going to get started. usually what we do is, and I'll get back to the divine name in just a second. Usually what we do is we pick a topic. Now, the last 5 shows have been like a theme, like a study that we've been going through. We've read the entire book of Zechariah. It was great. And we learned a lot, but we were focused on these angels of Ya'ol. I'm going to use the anglicized forms often because I speak English. But, I also realize people like to hear the original form. So I might say them as well. And occasionally I'll even say Jehovah or Yahweh without thinking, because I'm trying to be accommodating, right? I realize not everyone understands what I just said or may say and have said. And that anyone could have figured out, which is what I was about to say, about Ya'ol versus Yahweh or Jehovah, right? This isn't really new. Again, there is some new stuff. The recent thing showing on my page right now where I talk about the article that highlights the finding from the 13th century BCE. So if you go from the 6th century to the 13th, you're almost 2,000 years of pretty clear evidence and use of Ya'ol and over a broad range of various people. Again, as I say, that has nothing to do with the Masoretic evidence of later rabbis, right? Post-Christian rabbis and Jews, Masoretes. That's all later stuff. They were vowing the divine name in several different ways, as I've pointed out and will again. And so what if they say it's pronounced a certain way, right? There's a lot of mysticism in Kabbalah, right? That's why you get the divine name Hova, Jehovah, used often by these rappers like Jay-Z and others, right? They're blending their music with Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, okay? Where a lot of these terms and pronunciations come from with certain meanings that I'll get into more in my coming discussion of these issues, the post-first century rabbinic and Masoretic understanding of the divine name. But again, I've talked about it extensively, and I'm focused on the best evidence, and I just referred to a lot of it. And none of it points to Yahweh or Yehovah. So, and this is where I was going to go to finalize what I was saying about the divine name before we go back to our theme, which, like I was saying before, is often, just one show, a theme. Like you'll see the thumbnail. The thumbnail doesn't always relate to the content, though. Some of it, right? I have a video with a guy kneeling at a woman on a wheelchair. It's not my most popular. I guess people don't like helping elderly ones, right? All these people, they just want to watch Trinity and argue. It's embarrassing. But either way, the ones who do watch it, I appreciate I can tell there's a core, several hundred that they just want to know the best information on these subjects, right? Not just looking for ammo to go wage war with a bunch of other people who want to argue, right? Actually trying to feel good about life, do the best we can, live the best life we can, which is not by arguing constantly. Some of it, yeah, of course. Is that what we seek out, right? It's like the ultimate breakdown, right? We can't get through to someone. I'm going to share that in a moment. That I made a post on my community section from this other channel that I like and often reference on narcissism. But it captions something very important about how we can't really, when we present information, when we share knowledge with people, that's it. That's all we can do. They may not see any of it the way we're talking about it, and often can block what we're telling them if they don't agree at all, or they've been trained to block it, right? Like we know, like Watchtower and other groups, they're very sensitive to apostate material or anti-Watchtower, anything that would undermine their faith in Watchtower, right? It just like it's like acid. There's a really quick reaction. Like, get out of here, right? Well, I mean, not everyone. There's some Watchtower people who go right in today, but for the majority, right? We all know Watchtower apologists, the majority would be like, no, I don't want to hear it. And so that's fine. Right? Probably the majority of Catholics don't want to hear it, one God the Father or some stuff like that. Although they'd see it as training, so never mind. Now, we try to talk about certain issues, right? Like, so you see on the thumbnail, that's salt. You probably figured out that was salt. If not, I'll explain it more in a moment. We're going to get into the text where Jesus says you're the salt of the earth, what that means, properties of salt. Really good. We'll spend an hour, a little over an hour if necessary. We'll have a good, beneficial discussion. It'll hopefully be uplifting to you, give you some information, insight into what, as a Christian, we should consider when it comes to certain things Jesus said. Also, as I was saying, so we did a 5-part series on the angels of Jah in the book of Zechariah. That's not common, though. Usually it's every Saturday. Pick a theme. Thumbnail's kind of an indication, but not. It's not like even now, right? I talked about the divine name for the first 15 minutes or so since we've been going. Not entirely, but mostly, right? So you see, we're going to get to the subject of the salt of the earth and salt and different things you can maybe benefit from or comment about. But we try to just enjoy each other's association and praise Jah, right? I was mentioning before, it's our main number one belief, praising Jah, one God the Father to us. We know a lot of people believe in Trinity. We've talked about Trinity. I have a whole bunch of videos on Trinity. So we don't agree with it. We don't agree with the metaphysic that came about later. We believe in the 4th century is certainly in terms of being required belief, right, for acceptance and communion. And so, we see these things really as the product of a different version of Christianity, headed by Constantine at these councils and things, right, and improving and even lending terms like consubstantial, right, homoousios, key term. None of this is in the Bible. Right? Yeah, so we understand. We talk about Trinity all the time. We know Trinitarians point to certain texts. We get it. Okay, we see it differently. See the last 5 parts of this CW Jah Live discussion. You'll understand basically the critical difference between us and Trinitarians. We believe in one God the Father, but the angels, sons of God, as gods who either represent one God the Father and act and speak and are spoken to as Him, can be given authority even to act independently like Jesus, or like Michael over the people of Israel, but Jesus even more so after his resurrection, all authority in heaven and on earth, right? He didn't have that before, though. See, so we differ from Trinitarians. But they see, well, it gets kind of tricky with them too, because if he was always God, as they say, he would always have the authority in heaven and on earth. Well, that's his humanity being given that authority. That won't work because they always then say that the authority can only be wielded by God, right? So is humanity God then? Well, if it's not God, then why are you saying that? Why are you saying only God can have that level of authority? Which, if it's all authority in heaven and earth, would be true. He's on God's throne, literally. So where are you getting all this humanity from that's not described anywhere? Not Revelation, not anywhere else except when he's on earth or appears in certain ways, basically on earth. That's it. Not even always in the same way. So Trinitarians kind of need this stuff. It's another belief that developed later, right? So you went from divine name to Trinity. We're getting the salt to the earth, though. See, the idea is to benefit spiritually, right? To bring us together, to praise God the Father, to understand His Son. That's our number 2 belief. Firstborn, Messiah, sent forth one. 1 John 4:14, Micah 5, right? The one who came and who gave His life. So that if we gave our life like He did or had faith in Him to the point where we would do so, then we would be forgiven. Whereas prior to that, there was a system of sacrifices that allowed for God to deal with humans in a condition where He's not really interested in dealing with people in this condition, right? Even many of us say, well, why does it continue? Well, it's because, again, there's a purpose behind it all, as we've talked about and as we can see. And in the actual datable ways that identify humanity, we're not that old, right? You hear often findings and things that 400,000-year-old structure, and they're dating the sediments that encase those things most of the time. Wood's usually been deteriorated beyond radiocarbon dating if it's that old. And as we talked about before, there are things that don't even make sense based on the dating that is according to the layers of the earth in which they're found, right? We have a lot of different things happening geologically that scientists don't account for. They see it all as only random natural events that take place in ways that even they can't fully account for. If it's so random and they don't even know how it all forms, what collisions have occurred. They think the whole earth formed from a collision and the moon peeled off from that and became phase locked somehow, totally different from every other moon that we know about. And the distance that the moon is phase locked to the earth, phase locked means we only see one side of it. And it's the only moon that does that. And it's phase locked so that when it shows a full moon, it can eclipse the sun. It's perfectly positioned. So in spite of the fact that the sun is much farther away and much bigger, they actually look exactly the same size at certain times because of that precision, right? Yeah, see, these are not accidents, not in our view. You can believe it, think about it however you want. The aggregate of information, as we've talked about before, and as I will again, before we get to the salt of the earth, the aggregate of information that reliably identifies human civilization, humankind like us, right? Astronomy, metallurgy, language. These are just some of the key things that identify us definitively. There's no question about it. Right? It's like you see a metal sword, that's a human, and the humans were there, right? You see writing, yeah, that's a human. I'm not talking about glyphs, right? There's certain drawings, glyphs, and paintings that can be questionable in certain. I'm talking about actual. There has to be like cuneiform, hieroglyphs would a language has to be discernible, not just paintings of the environment or surroundings or things. It has to be a system. So the earliest we have is like 5,000 at most, 5,000 years. Cuneiform, certain glyphs, that's it. 5, even if you want to say 6, that puts it right how the Bible says it. With cuneiform being the earliest identifiable, again, except for potentially some glyphs or things, but I mean, when you look at, right, you got things like the cuneiform tablets, you got the Fuente Magna bowl that was found. Yeah, it's like a proto-cuneiform. And it was found in South America, right, potentially because of the flood or pre-flood, right, because the earth continued to be one language. And then after the flood, Tower Babel spread, boom, boom. That's why all the languages we have are datable, other than just like one or two, right, cuneiform, proto-cuneiform, or glyphs. So that all fits, right? That is basically limited to a time, right? They keep talking about all these civilizations and things. And these no. The writing does not coincide with that. The metallurgy does not coincide with that. If they were sophisticated enough to be writing like we have been, then metallurgy is not too much of a leap from that, a level of thinking. Astronomy, right? The ability to bore holes through rock and position them so that the light from certain stars and moons and planets appears at certain times. That does not go back further than, again, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. You know, the oldest place that people want to try to date, that's, you know, there's some, again, they're like, they go way back. They go crazy, I think. Like Göbekli Tepe, you'll often hear that. We've talked about before. It's about a couple hundred miles from Mount Ararat, where Noah's Ark landed. I believe Göbekli Tepe fits all the descriptions in terms of the animals and creatures, from insects to birds to cattle, everything, except fish, which weren't described and weren't needed because of the water. And you can have both salt, seawater, and fresh water coincide, right? We have cenotes around the earth where both are separate. We also have fish that survive primarily in salt water, like sharks, bull sharks, that can adapt to basically fresh water, rivers and lakes, and have. And so that shows that they can survive on very low salt water and even adapt to fresh water. But you have so all the evidence that's there to support everything the Bible says, the water deep from within the earth. We have found recently and confirmed there's more water under the earth than on top of it. All of it. The ice, the lakes, the seas, underneath. Well, how'd the Bible know that? Just got it lucky, I guess, right? Just happened to know there was so much water under there, it could flood the whole surface of the earth combined with the water that's already on the earth. And we've shown that that's very likely the case because of the fact that the highest mountain on the earth could fit in the oceans. And if there's more water underneath the earth than on top of it, a lot more, then yeah, I think no problem. Right. And so, people say things and it's so weird, right? You can tell they don't look at it at all. It's just crazy. It's like I was going to say earlier, I didn't really wrap this up with the divine name. I will now, though. Right? You got groups like Watchtower and others, right? It's not like Yah-O, everybody, on the divine name. Yod, He, Wah, and or in Greek, Yod to Alpha, Omega, like we see in 4Q Leviticus B. Or like Diodorus, a Greek historian of the 1st century BC, writes with regard to representing the pronunciation he heard the Jews saying. It's not like a lot of that is new. In fact, other than the 13th century BC, you find, right, the Elephantine papyri, we've known about that a long time. Diodorus, we've known about that and Yah-O a long time. 4Q Leviticus B, Watchtower's known about that since it basically was found, well, soon after, right? It's published in the appendices of the NWT, certainly from the 1984 edition onward. So why couldn't they just put it together and say, oh, yeah, so we have everybody saying it's Yah-O, and, the final He can serve as a vowel marker in Hebrew and in other languages in ancient times. So I guess, we'll just change it and say Yah-O, Jah-O, right? Because we want to be accurate. We want to follow the best information. No, Watchtower saw that King James people weren't using it, and the divine name really was there, and the form people knew about was Jehovah. Give him credit for that. It's better than Yahweh, I think, but still, it's not like they then later adapted to the best information, like, right, where's the light getting brighter on the divine name? How could they have not adapted to what Jah has been showing them at least, right? Well, again, even before the Dead Sea Scrolls, but certainly since the late 40s, 50s, 60s, we'll say, they had to have known. 4Q Leviticus B, in the 1st century BCE, a text of Leviticus uses Yah-O in Greek. And so you have the Jews in the 1st century actually using it in biblical text. You have a Greek historian telling you that's how they pronounce it when they invoke God, the Jews who worship the God of Moses, from the same century, 1st century BCE. You have the Jews at the colony in Elephantine in the 4th, 5th century, 3rd, 4th, 5th century, using Yah-O all over. That's all they used. Even when it's Yod He He, it's Yah-O, because the He, again, represents no sound. Either way, it's usually Yod He Wah, which is exactly what we see now in the 13th century BC. You find, where's the advancement? Right? If Watchtower is supposed to be getting things better, right, in terms of the divine, especially that, right? It's like what they're known for in many ways because of using it in the NWT and in the New Testament, right? The name, Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, why aren't they adjusting to the light that's already been there for a long time? Right? Once I separated from Watchtower and then kind of went through several years of figuring out what to do and realized, okay, yeah, that I do believe in God, do believe in the God of the Bible, believe in one God the Father, Jah, right? Number one of our beliefs. Yeah, I see the evidence for Jesus, pre-Christian evidence. We have a whole series going on, all this evidence. Yeah. So, okay, historical person, it's very unlikely all this could have been made up. So it all fits and makes sense with the creator and the plan, all the stuff. Golden rule, right? That fits, puts us above hypocrisy. It's our third belief. 1, 2, 3. One God the Father, Jah. Messiah, Jesus. Golden rule, you and me. Right? That's how we know. Okay, would I do that to me? Would I want that done to me? Okay, that's what I'll do or not do. That's how you know. But people who want to be hypocrites, right, and take advantage of others, they don't care. Well, so that's how we know, right? We can use that same standard to identify people who aren't playing by the same rules as ours. And if our rules are fair, our rule is fair, and it is, right? We're basically saying we'll take the same thing we're giving out. What's unfair about that? So it doesn't mean we don't make mistakes and we don't have to pay for them or we can't apologize, right? It's kind of the whole idea of being Christian. We understand we do that. We're not trying to. We don't like get proud or happy when we make an error. We just know it's going to happen because we make mistakes like everybody. And when we make them, we just do our best to change them, undo any damage. do it better next time, right? We're dealing with a world of difficulty, but not impossibility. Like we're going to talk about in a moment, we're described as salt of the earth, and elsewhere as light of the world, right? We'll talk about that more another show. We're going to focus on the salt tonight. But as I said before, we often get into different discussions of different things. And so I encourage you to not just look at the thumbnail and think, oh, well, they're just going to talk about salt and us being salt. Well, that's to us important enough. But that really is almost never just the thing we talk about. Even on the Zechariah videos, I think we start out, well, some of those are more based on a theme, so most of it does start and end with that, the angels of Jah and Zechariah. But it might be something to consider more than the thumbnail. At least the first 20 minutes or so, you'll see kind of how the flow of the content will go. But, when we talk about salt, let's make sure, let me see who's in the chat. We're going to get right to the salt here. Who do we got? We got Betsy, as I said, Pib, Faithful Theology, good to see you. Ricky Eaton. Oh, well, I guess it depends on how you want to look at that, Ricky. But I see where you're going. I think, okay. Well, so we'll do, what I might do, there's a good chance, in fact, some in the chat are asking if we can talk about different subjects. And I guess, we can. Let me get to this salt stuff. I think, though, tomorrow I was actually thinking of doing another show. Maybe an open session. Maybe something else, though. So maybe that would be a time. Someone's asking about predestination. Either way, you're free to bring up things in the chat that aren't like something we've covered a lot. I do have some stuff in my books, some of my articles. I'm trying to think, do I have videos? Well, you have my debate with Dr. Mori, right? We talk about that and some other stuff. There was another video. Well, yeah, if you go to the debate, like there's a debates playlist on my CW Jah tube, Ricky. And maybe we'll talk about it a little bit, but just in case I don't get back to it on this show, because I want to get into this salt stuff. And then maybe tomorrow, if I do like an open session, it's like open to pretty much anything. Sometimes I'll bring something up, but it's usually like, okay, what is Ricky saying? What's Betsy? What's Faith? Well, it's like more you guys. So let me finish this though. If you go to my debate playlist, there's a debate in there that I did on the radio with Dr. Robert Mori. And it was supposed to be about the Trinity, but it ended up being about Watchtower and knowledge and foreknowledge and stuff. We talk about a lot of these issues there. And then if you look at the link, well, if you look at the comments, I've pinned a comment to another video that basically is me reviewing a section from Genesis that I discussed with Dr. Mori. And that's an important video, I think, to watch if you want like more, like later after I'm done, if I don't get to everything you want to discuss, or maybe tomorrow we'll talk about it. Either way, definitely, if you haven't heard my debate with Dr. Mori, I would listen to that. Then the other video link below that. And then in my books, I have a whole chapter on the sovereignty of God. I talk about my debate with Mori. I present sections of it. And I discuss, right? See, because after my debate with Mori, he challenged me to write, a bunch of articles defending my view. And then he said he would respond. And I did. I wrote articles, and then I published those articles in my books after he didn't respond. And so I published in my third edition after he didn't respond, and on my blog, and elsewhere when I had a different version of Elihu. But either way, I wrote him. He didn't respond. He ended up sending me an email where he insulted me. I still have that. But I would encourage you to take a look at that, right? Oasis. Oasis is the acronym that I developed basically to respond to Maury. But so if you want more on that, I think that should give you quite a bit to chew on. Maybe I should make a playlist, though. I don't think I have a playlist on predestination. Anyway, so it's good to have you all with us. I want to talk about this salt, though, and then we'll see what kind of time we have, okay? Let's talk about what Jesus said. We've been doing like a lot of doctrinal stuff. And oh, by the way, we do partake, right? So if you've come at the end of the show, we've been going for about 40 minutes. We go up to 2 hours. It may not take us that long, though. Once I get into these accounts, we're going to talk about salt for an hour. We're going to read the accounts, a little bit about salt, and then just try to understand what it means for us. That's what Jesus said we are, right? Well, we're going to read it right now. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and read the account. I'll pull it up. I'm going to pull it up. You know, there's not like a lot of doctrinal stuff. Usually we'll read from the Bible Hub because we can see different translations. We can see the original texts also if we want to. And like, you know, with the Zechariah series, that was a good thing to do. So I appreciate that, Ricky. No need to pay me for it. And anything you want to contribute, it's up to you, but you don't need to do that. I don't do this for money. If you want, you're not the, you know, I do need to get to predestination. I've had people ask me that. I've talked about it. I can't think of a video or a session where I've like really focused on it though recently. So it might be time to do that. Maybe tomorrow, maybe an open session where we really focus on predestination. I won't get into it a lot. I'll just bring it up and say, okay, for you people who believe in predestination, you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. Either way, I'm just thinking, you know, while we do these things. We're going to read about salt, though. Let's focus. There's something here. There's something for us, and we need it, right? We need to know how we are salt. We kind of know how we're light. When we will get to that in another show, kind of get to all the different ways Christians are described, right? We know we're sinners too. We're not perfect. We try our best, but we're not like proud of it. We're not like going around like saying, oh, we shouldn't be, right? If we are, we have a problem, we deal with it. Outside of our problems, though, right? We just try to do the best we can and help people. We're not trying to make it hard on everybody. You got to believe this, got to believe that. 3 things. One God the Father. Right? If you don't want to use Yah or that, just use Jah. You can even use Yahweh, fine. One God the Father, though. Right? We're not like here to... Bible doesn't say you have to use this form pronunciation of the divine name. I believe it's clear. I think the evidence points in this way, like I described earlier. But we're not here to make it hard on people. It does say one God the Father, though, right? 1 Corinthians 8 says. So it's not like we're making it hard. No, it's what it says. And then people want Trinity. Well, then go. There's plenty of Trinity out there. Go ahead. Right here, we do one God the Father. Trinitarians are welcome, but they can't like get in our way when we're teaching about one God the Father. It's not good. That doesn't work. And you're welcome to be here, though. Some Trinitarians, it's just the way they understand God. The only way it makes sense to them, or they've learned it and they just can't shake it. So we're trying to get in your head and force you to, if you're here to try to just work with people and not disrupt people who are actually teaching word for word what the Bible says, one God the Father, we're not here to exclude you, right? Jesus sent forth Savior, right? Golden rule, that's it. And we have our beliefs. It's not like that's the only thing we believe, period. We don't go around requiring people to believe every single thing the exact same way. Most things are pretty clear, right? Don't lie. right? If you do, you apologize, right? Matthew 18. How to deal with things and what we're to do and not to do is pretty clear in the Bible. And if it's not, we shouldn't be forcing people to believe it, right? If the Bible doesn't say, don't do this, no matter what you think, probably you shouldn't be telling people, don't do this. The Bible doesn't say it, so why are you doing it? You got to be really careful here, at least where we're concerned, because we're trying to make it easy. Not so easy, we just compromised it. No, right? We got three things, and we can't even get people to really accept that. Right? You don't have to have money, you don't have to do nothing. All you have to do is believe and want to help people understand the God of the Bible, why we're here, what we're doing, what's going on. Let them have room to develop their beliefs and understand history, right? And then the Messiah, right? Point to the pre-Christian evidence, understand, show its relationship historically and the events that have happened. We can document the rationality and the beauty of the golden rule. These are ways that we can help people appreciate life and be happy, right? That's what we want. We want people to actually be able to wake up and feel good about themselves. Like, oh, I understand. Okay, I realize where I am in time, basically, right? We don't have to every detail, but basically, things are going this way. And in life, if I do these things and live by this principle and trust in this creator that I can see most likely exists, right? Life only comes from life. Life is clearly manifesting signs of intelligence. And historically, the Bible and the events in the Bible are more verifiable and believable than anything else, right? Even the events of Genesis, like I was saying earlier, with regard to the flood, all of it, and creation. We've talked about it. So this isn't like we just, oh yeah, Bible, we got to believe it. No, we want to believe the truth. Whether it's divine name, anything. Oh, right, we think it's Jehovah, Yahweh, no, 13th century, Yah, oh, okay. Fine by me. Is that what the people who Moses told to go in and to curse the mountain? He said that Yah, that's the God. Fine. The Jews at Elephantine. Okay. The biblical documents from the 1st century BCE and the audit, all of it. Really? Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's the best evidence. I'll take it. That's kind of how I am, right? But again, if you want to, I know the divine name can be sensitive. People get used to it. And I look at Watchtower. Watchtower, thinks the divine name, their use of it is like a proof, they're people for God's name. And yet they haven't really adopted the best form of the name. And they've done good things with the name. As you know, I've defended them where I think that's the case. But let's stop pretending like they just really were so dialed into the divine name, they've been on top of it this whole time. No way. They're way behind. And they overdid the use of the divine name in the New Testament, clearly, using it where it could even be Jesus and certainly isn't a quotation. It's more an interpretation on their part, right? Goes against the basis for using it in the best way in the first place. So it's not like they hit it perfectly with the divine name. Better than almost every other Bible, though, if not every. Either way, ours is the next entry. So we'll do it, I think, right. We'll get all the New Testament ones right, and we'll get it right in the Old Testament. Yeah, I have a surprise for you coming. Just keep watching. I know, surprises. That's why it's a surprise. Things are coming. Where's the salt, though, right? Okay, we need to hear this. Salt, why are we the salt? It's just one verse, right? Matthew 5:13. And it's very important. Very important. Now, there's more than that. He gets into it more, a little bit more detail, Mark. But let's start with Matthew. Let me bring you guys up. There's you guys on there. I have to, okay. Mm-hmm. So if I guess I could have you guys like that. Put the people in the chat there. Is that covered up? Maybe I should make it bigger. Would that make it bigger, though? No. Well, I guess just broader, right? That's the thing with the NWT version I have. Right? It's not like the NWT is very easy to obtain on its own this way, so I have this version. But it's kind of the only size I can make it on this text form. So, but when I change it, it realigns. So I just have to go I'll find it again. Okay, here's the text we're going to be reading, right? So it's Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. And in the sermon, right, he's talking to all these people. He's talking about how you can be happy, right? Does it seem like Jesus wants us to be sad? No. Sometimes we're sad because that's just the way life is, right? It's sometimes a problem for us. It's not easy. It's hard, even when it's easy, trying to talk to people about things that seem to us simple. In fact, right before we read this, I was going to do this. Let me do this real quick because I was going to show you guys from my community chat. If you haven't seen this, I think it's important. Let me go ahead and bring you up here. So this is the channel here. It's the community section, right? So it shows us right there. But before that, sometimes I'll share different things. Wrote this one right here. I shared this quote from the Little Shaman. I think her name is Shaman Sisterson. She's like a specialist with narcissistic abuse and narcissistic personality disorder. You can go to her channel, take a look at it. I highly encourage you. She's very good on this topic. Very good with topics that relate to diffusing difficult personalities and understanding balance in relationships, which is not common today, unfortunately. Either way, she wrote here. Let me bring it up a little bit more. Okay, that's good. So I wrote, "This is so true," right? A little smaller right there. But what I posted and said was so true was this. It's very common for people to try to find ways to defeat the narcissist's ability to twist things. Now, narcissists, we're dealing specifically with narcissists here, but this could apply to people who are just, maybe they're not narcissists, like people with the actual disorder, the personality disorder, but maybe they have narcissistic tendencies, or on certain subjects, they act narcissistic. That happens, right? We all at times may display levels of emotional maturity or immaturity that could indicate a narcissistic or non-narcissistic tendency at that time. That doesn't mean you're a narcissist. It often just means that whatever the topic was that led to you manifesting that tendency, a narcissistic tendency or emotional immaturity, was difficult for you. Now, if everything or the majority of things in your life are difficult for you emotionally, you're probably suffering from narcissistic personality disorder, right? NPD or something similar, borderline. Either way, I'm not a specialist, but I look into these things, and I think I've met quite a few people who don't just express narcissistic tendencies, again, like we all do or have. Like their whole life is an emergency. Their whole life is an emotional breakdown. Almost like 80 to 90% or more. They are on edge. Everything affects them to one extreme or the other. Okay, that's emotional instability, immaturity. You're not supposed to be reacting to every single thing someone says or does. It suggests an immaturity on your part. And so people who are narcissists, right? Not just people who like think they're oftentimes we think of narcissists as just arrogant people. Well, that might be the case, or they could be just someone, again, as I said, expressing a narcissistic tendency at times. Maybe they're arrogant at work, but never elsewhere, right? I don't know. But there's certain things that might not be narcissistic personality disorder, but could be narcissistic. Either way, someone who's suffering from the disorder of narcissism or emotional immaturity, we'll say, which includes narcissism, it won't matter. It's not the information you're telling them. It's not the facts you're giving them that they're not able to process. They just don't. Okay? What does that mean? Well, it means if they wanted to, okay, and this is the difference between a narcissist that, like a child is often emotionally mature because they're a child, right? They haven't developed emotionally yet. They're supposed to learn that at home, not at these homo classrooms and stuff where that you have all these emotionally unstable and physically abused teachers, right, perverting themselves in their classroom. And then these kids come in, right, just full breakdown. That's what's happening. I've seen it. I raised 3 kids. I saw the school system. I know. Total breakdown. Either way, outside of children, right, when you're talking about an adult, so when you pass 18, right, 21, you develop, people go to school, excuse me, you can be emotionally mature and still completely mentally, like, perfect. Like, you understand math, right, you understand grammar, mentally, and you can process information like anyone else. Emotionally, though, you can't deal with things the same way. So when you're confronted with information that you can process, but you don't, what does that mean? It means usually you don't want to, right? What other reason could there be? They can, but they don't. So we often get into these disagreements with adults. They're fully capable mentally, but emotionally, they're immature. They won't listen when they don't want to. So it doesn't matter how clear the info is, right? I just referred to earlier in this show several times a wide range of information over a long period of time that is pretty conclusive, including a recent find that is the most important and datable to actual events and people of the Bible right after Moses. Doesn't matter, right? Do you think the people who are in Watchtower don't understand that? Of course they do, right? They can read and see and watch my video, and doesn't matter. They don't want to believe it. No, they'd rather go listen to Dr. Nehemiah Gordon and the later rabbis and Masoretes. It's very common for people to try to find ways to somehow defeat the narcissist, emotionally immature, or unstable ability to twist things into something they're not. Unfortunately, what people eventually find is that it's not possible to do this. A person can twist anything into anything if they really want to. Remember, that's why I said, this depends on what you want. What are you looking for? What are you trying to do? Yeah, different times it's more difficult than others. Right? I was raised in Watchtower, 3rd generation Watchtower. That's all I knew. No, that isn't nothing. I didn't make a conscious choice to go to Watchtower as an adult. Like, I didn't know anything about it, and I heard about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Let's go. No, I was raised in it. That's all I knew. And there were things in it that I could see were true or believe were true and still do. And then as I got older and learned more, I realized there was more. And I realized a lot of things weren't true. So and the same thing, even when I continued to believe in God, the divine name, when I realized, hey, the evidence actually points over here, right? At least controversial form Jah, but it's Jah, why, and I developed that form, right? Yah-oh-wah with the hyphenated final aspirant. Tried to tell you guys earlier, several years ago, hey, it's going to be happening here. This is before the 13th century BCE finding, right? And before that, we had plenty of evidence showing this. That's why I said earlier, Watchtower's blind. They should have known this and did know this, and they didn't do anything about this, and they've been using Jehovah no matter what the evidence pointed to. Right? Because there are people for that name. They thought they'd be gone by now. Or at least that's what they told everyone, right? Basically. So there's nothing you can do. There's nothing we can do. Not for people in the Watchtower, right? What are you going to do? Well, you're going to show them evidence from the 13th century BCE that tells you how they were pronouncing the divine name? Yeah, we've done that. They don't listen. Oh, you're going to show Trinitarians one God the Father? Right. They know all about it. They don't care. No. Well, they care, but they don't believe that. They believe more than that. And so you trying to tell them to believe that shows you don't understand who you're talking to, or you might have a problem yourself. Right? You could get two narcissists from opposing points of view. Neither one of them are ever going to listen to each other, and they will argue forever. As I've said before, if you've been following me for a while, you know that, 10 years ago and 10 years before that, I said, in 10 years, you're going to have the exact same people asking you the exact same questions all over again, Trinitarian and non, because they don't listen. It doesn't matter. We'll never hear it. And 10 years from now, same thing, all over again. Because of this, right? You can twist anything into anything, regardless of how clear or clever you are. You cannot stop them from doing this if they choose. Give yourself a break, right? Unless you have to. And this is the purpose behind it, right? Why are we spending so much time with people who absolutely refuse to listen? Your only responsibility, is to be as clear, as honest, and as genuine as you can be. You can only relay information to another person. You can't understand it for them. That's very important, right? You cannot understand information for another person. No matter how, one God the Father, and they hear that, one God the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit, right? That's how they're going to understand it. You can't understand it as one God the Father, one person. God's one person, the Father. Galatians 3:20, 1 Corinthians 8:6, right? No, they're going to understand it how they believe it. And how do you know you're not falling victim to the same thing we're talking about? Well, that's why we believe only what's explicitly stated in the sources of authority we all accept, so that it's not even subject to the question. Not unless we're somehow misunderstanding the word for word teaching of the text in a non-figurative or non-apocalyptic setting, right? 1 Corinthians, Galatians 3. So, 1 Timothy 2:5, one God, one mediator between God and man, referring to him in the historical sense in which he gave his life as a man, becoming our mediator, Jesus Christ. So if there's one God between him and us, and the one God that Paul writes about in 1 Corinthians is the Father, then God's only one person, so he can't be the mediator and a party to the contract, Galatians 3. Exactly how clear does it have to be made for people? It doesn't have to be made any more clear, does it? But we cannot understand it for them, no matter what. That's why the society's gone crazy, even outside of religious circles, right? I think in part, this whole insanity of false religion and different views and people just not accepting what's objectively in front of you leads to all this other breakdown and insanity, right? Over gender, just denying biological science and things. There's the relationship here, but it's not the exact same topic. Either way, I think there's a narcissistic element consistent in these areas of life, whether it's religion, science, or, gender identity. You can't understand it for them. You cannot force them to hear it the way you meant it. Right? You're saying in the beginning was the Word was with God. And the Word was a God, and one of the sons of God, whom God and Jesus say are gods. Right? He's one of the sons of God, gods, who's with God in the beginning, just like God says, let us make. And consistent with Job 38, involves the creation of the earth, which was made at the same time as the heavens, Genesis 1:1, prior to God actually returning and acting upon the created heavens and earth. So, yeah, that's not polytheism in a way that's anywhere near what is objected to by the Bible, which makes it very clear there's no God but one. There are those who are in heaven who are called gods, and on earth who are called gods, just as there are many gods and many lords, but to us there is one God the Father. Right? So there's many gods and many lords. There are those who are called God and called Lord in heaven and on earth. So if they're in heaven and on earth, there are beings in heaven called gods and who are gods. And we already know that's the case from God and Jesus elsewhere. Psalm 82, John 10. Confirmed by the Melchizedek scroll. You can believe whatever you want about men. They're never called gods, judges as human Israelite judges. Whereas the princes who are appointed over the nations are judged by God frequently. We've been reading even in Zechariah how one of the angels from God came to the angel of Jah and said, hey, I'm going to go punish the nations because they went too far in punishing your people. Right? Jah, Michael was appointed over the nation of Israel. His people were subject to punishments because of their disobedience, because they're in a sinful state while they're helping produce the Messiah that will save all humans. Jah sees that the punishment meted out by the other nations, the princes of the other nations, the other sons of God, Deuteronomy 32:8, this is with Daniel, about the princes being these angelic spirits who contest Michael, the prince of Israel. And then you have Satan referred to as the ruler of the world, and you have the conditions of the earth as they are. So, you have these things which occur, and you have all this evidence, right? You have all the evidence that shows that the princes over the nations are frequently judged for how they affect God's people, which is exactly what Psalm 82 is talking about, the whole purpose of God entering the council of the gods, sons of the Most High. We did a whole video reading the entire book of Psalms up to that point about angels and gods, and how in the book of Psalms it even starts out talking about how God and his anointed one have taken their stand against the nations. The whole book of Psalms is about the king of Israel and the gods of the nations, and how they've taken their stand against God and Israel. Some people are just unbelievable. They will never learn, no matter what you show them, even if it's the Jewish understanding that they were spirits of Belial prior to and during the time of Jesus in the first century. No, they'll go with rabbis and post-Christian Jews who reject Jesus and frequently reject this entire biblical belief about gods and the sons of God in the first place. It's unbelievable, right? So it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what evidence you provide. They're gonna believe whatever they want. And this comes from this that was posted by her as well. Stop stressing yourself out trying to find ways to say things so that narcissists cannot twist them, right? You're not going to be able to come up with some special way. We're the salt of the earth in a way that we have to focus on more so than people who refuse to believe. And the way you know that most of all is their constant questioning. Like I said before, they'll be asking the exact same question 5-10 years from now. So you don't need to worry about it anyway. They bring up the same question over and over again, and you talk about it before, and they're not a new person. Just saying, you know what, I'll talk to you in 5 years, okay? And no reason to go on and on about it now. No matter how clever, assertive, or clear your words are, someone who wants to twist them into something else can do so. That is not an indication of some kind of failure on your part. It's an indication that people will think, say, or do whatever they want, and you cannot control them. And so we don't even try. We don't think that's a good thing to do. We don't shun people. Doesn't mean we have to hang out with you. It doesn't mean we have to associate with people who blaspheme Jesus or God and the Bible and all that stuff. No, I probably won't hang out with you. Sorry. Yeah, I'll work with you and we can do things that don't involve religion or ethics that I share and you don't. But, it's so weird. You want to talk about the abusive lifestyles of people like LGBTQ plus people and stuff, and they get all bothered by me presenting the facts about their abuse, And yet they say the worst things about Christians nonstop. It's incredible. I think it's perverted as well. So let's go ahead and talk about salt now, right? We had a little further intro into this whole difficulty we often have with people as Christians, right? Even with other Christians, even Jesus with his disciples, right? It's like, why am I even talking to you? He said that. Now they were new, they're still learning, but still, right? It's like they weren't even paying attention at times. That must have been very frustrating for him, because he's like totally focused on what he's got to do and all this stuff, and he's got these guys, right? Of course, the Father chose them, and he understood that, and he realized why later. But we're all failures and sinful in some way, so no one was going to be perfect. But they actually ended up being the perfect group to do what they had to do at that time to carry on the message after he was raised up. So when he was alive, though, he talked about Christians, right? He talked about us and what we should be like. That over here. So we're in Matthew here. It's NWT. Use NWT because I prefer it in many cases. Use the divine name in most instances correctly. It often gets theological text correct, right? I don't care what anyone says. We've talked about it, so you don't need to hear it, right? We know about it. It's the other side that's got the problems when it comes to those texts most of the time. So NWT here, there's no problem with it, even if you hate it. Hey, read your own text. You're not required to use NWT or any text. You have a Bible that isn't a perverted edition, right? Even if it doesn't use the divine name and it's perverted in that way, as long as it reads correctly in other cases, it's fine. All right. Matthew 5:13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its strength, how will its saltness be restored? It is no longer usable for anything but to be thrown outside, to be trampled on by men. And then he goes on to talk about the lie of the world. You are the salt of the earth. I know probably all of you have heard that before. You read it as a common, section of the Bible. Most people have read or heard it. You are the salt of the earth. If the salt loses its strength, how will its saltness be restored? It is no longer usable for anything but to be thrown outside, to be trampled on by men. Right? So he's talking about us the whole way. He's not talking about the earth, losing its strength and being restored and being thrown outside. He's talking about the salt, talking about us. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its strength, how will its saltness be restored? It's no longer usable for anything but to be thrown outside, to be trampled on by men. It's very similar to John 15 in some respects, right? That we're in Jesus by being part of the vine that he is. But the Father's the gardener, right? He comes in and he cleans or removes any branch not producing fruit in him. It's thrown outside, right? Thrown into the fire. It's like the salt here. So the salt has strength, just like the Christians in John 15 are in the vine. But if you're in the vine and not producing fruit, you can be thrown out. You can be cut out. And if you lose your strength, if as the salt you lose your strength, you're not usable for anything and thrown outside. Right now, we're not going to get off onto this very much, but note the immediate comparison. You're the light of the world. A city cannot be hid when situated upon a mountain. Right? People light a lamp and set it not under a measuring basket, but upon a lampstand. And it shines upon all those in the house, right? In other words, there's a sense in which the light can be used and misused or not used at all, and you don't even see it, right? It's hidden. Like you have a lamp and then you put a basket over it. So it doesn't even provide any light, basically. It might burn the basket and eventually. Probably be snuffed out though, right? Lack of oxygen. So there'd be no light. So he's saying something similar here in the next verse. The light, but if you put the light under a basket, no one's going to see it, right? The light's going to get snuffed out. Likewise, let your light shine before men that they may see your fine works and give glory to your Father who is in the heavens. Right? We're not perfect. We make mistakes. That's not what he's talking about, right? We know that. But outside of that, we'll go around like proudly proclaiming our mistakes like a bunch of perverts do. No, we correct ourselves when we repent, we move on, and we make amends. So there's a way in which our light is usable. It can be used to illuminate to other people. Yes, you can and should continue. Yes, we do have information that supports all these events in the Bible. Yes, we do have evidence that points to a consistent use of the divine name during the periods of the Bible and after. Yes, we do have information that points to Jesus, pre-Christian evidence that says all these things would be done by someone unique and fulfilled in him, historically verifiable, Jewish, Christian, non-Christian, non-Jewish sources. You know, there's a lot of light to share. And just helping people, right? Helping people to have confidence, to live. Right? Not argue constantly and make them doubt. That's what arguing does. Nonstop. We want to help them initially with questions. Sure, when you're new, you're learning. If you haven't figured things out after a while, you're done, right? You just stop bothering people who are on the path of belief. It's not going to help you or us, and we don't need it, right? So you either believe or you don't. We're not here to believe for you. Remember what we read earlier? Yeah, we would love everyone to believe what we think is true. Of course. You know what? That's not how I'm never going to think like that. And if I do, I'm going to stop it because that's not possible. It's not possible to have everyone believe the way I do. And either they do or they don't, right? I can't go around worrying about people who just, no matter what I think is true or why, they're not going to believe it. It's okay. They don't have to, nor can I make them believe it the way I do. I can try. I can present information. I can only really convince the people that believe it like I do. They actually see it, they can put it together, and that makes sense to them just like it does to me. Whether that's true or not, we see it the same way, or similarly enough to be like, okay, yeah, I'm with that. I'm down with that. Not just constantly doubting, right? Non-stop going over the same stuff just to argue with people who don't care in the first place. They're just about arguing with you, right? It has nothing to do with belief. If it did, they'd already be doing it, like we talked about earlier, right? And that's why I read that thing from Little Shaman, because it can get frustrating, right? We're trying to be light, we're trying to be salt, we're trying to preserve, like we'll get to more about salt in a minute, the things that are good and wholesome in God's sight. It'd be frustrating, right? You start, talking to people and presenting all this light and stuff that you're convinced by. Excuse me. Take a little drink helps me sustain my voice. I don't talk extendedly often, and once or twice a week. But either way, right. So we want to make sure that we understand, how to be what Jesus is talking about, and how to avoid, right, losing our strength or having light hidden under a basket, right? We got all this light, and then it's like just sitting under a basket, right? Now, when you think of a light, though, what is a light in his case, before we go back to salt, really accomplish, right? Just like he says, it shines upon all those in the house. You're not really supposed to or even capable of. Maybe with the internet and certain things like we have now, it's a little more broad in a sense, globally like that. But really, all you're really able to effectively do, even today, I would say, but except for rare cases, is to illuminate your house. Now, that could be more than maybe just your immediate house, but maybe your community, your neighborhood. But certainly, your house can be illuminated with your light. Whoever's in it, whether it's you, one other person, a family, friends, people who come over, you can control that to the extent that you focus on what Jesus teaches us. It's hard. We get tempted. Things break us down. But that's what brings me to the whole salt part, this strength, right? And so you notice the light, he doesn't talk about strength. The salt is different from light. Light kind of illuminates. Light shines so that people can see what's happening, Salt doesn't do that, right? Salt's totally different. Before we talk more about salt, let's read a little bit more about the text from Jesus, right? You are the salt of the earth. If the salt loses its strength, how will its saltness be restored? It's not usable for anything but to be thrown outside and trampled. That's pretty significant, right? This losing our strength, that cannot happen, okay? We can maybe at times, have our light hidden away, and we don't think about the fact that it should be out, shining on illuminating something or someone in a way that's helpful. That's a little easier to kind of maybe see, right? You're walking around in darkness. I need a light. Where's the light? Under a basket? Put it open, right? Put it on the table so we can see. It's easier. How are you gonna, this though, right here, this is like, okay, you got a light, it's lit, you put under a basket. What are you doing, right? No, you let it shine on all those in the house. Let it shine before men. It's like recoverable really quickly. This though, it's like not recoverable at all. You lose your strength, it's over, right? So this is significant. And when I read that, I thought, you know what, we need to talk about this, because we often get caught up in things that are important, but they really can be exhausting because we cover them so much, or like with recent things involving people like Sam, excuse me. I'm not going to get off on him. I'm just using it as an example. And we're not going to forever never mention Sam. I even told him this. I said, we'll never be able to avoid all negative references, Sam. He was asking me how I wanted to be referred to. And I told him, just refer to me as Arian heretic, or Arian-like heretic from an Orthodox perspective, right? Arian-like heretic from an Orthodox perspective, whatever. I took it, he's coming from a good place. But this was subsequent discussions to our email thing and all that went down. But I just said, look, we're not going to avoid everything. I'll try to delete certain things. I don't want to deal with Sam anymore. I don't want to go to that extent. We went all the way. Everyone who saw it, read it, they know. I did everything that I believe I should have done and had to do. And that's it. We're done. I'm not going back on that. And, there may be occasional involvement with Sam here or there, and maybe even something productive. You never know. I'm not going to go back into that realm of engagement, right? And it's not necessary. We already went as far as I think any reasonable person, and maybe even farther, should have to go to have to prove a point with Sam. And I think we both reached a point, again, as I said before, where we're like, okay, this is it. We're done. We don't want to do this anymore. Let's move on. So, it doesn't mean there'll ever be disagreements or debates, or it'll come up, or I'll come up. That's fine. I'm not going to get off onto this deep dive into the more aggressive, often not productive aspects of Christian life, right? They're sometimes needed. I think that was needed, right? Look at what it produced. Ultimately, going to the extent that I did and that Sam did, brought us to a point that undid a lot of the things many of you didn't enjoy anyway, and that weren't really the best things to praise Jah. So it actually did result in something good. We're not going to get caught up in that whole madness or the extent of disagreement. That's what I mean by madness, just ongoing, often hateful, and not glorifying to God. Not going to do it again, right? Again, occasionally someone or something will come up, but we did what we had to do. I felt I did, and that's it. So, we don't want to lose our strength, right? If I just keep going and it just never ends, and then we're just constantly going back and forth with Sam or someone else like him, that's not going to preserve our strength. We don't have to anyway. We already showed, I believe, right? Sam has his own opinion. They have their own. That's fine. So do we. And I think we believe very reasonably that we demonstrate our views about God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, Trinity, non-Trinity, are defensible from a biblical perspective and thereafter. And we dealt with all kinds of issues, right? And extensively. And I'm not going to relive it. But again, if I continued doing that, no end, right? Just there's never any end. And we just keep going over this stuff and fighting over the Trinity and nonstop. You don't think I would eventually lose my strength? Yeah, it'd be eventually just something. I'd be so frustrated with me not being able to convince Sam and all this stuff, although I've learned how to deal with it, But like we read earlier, right? You can't convince people. You can help convince them, but you can't force them to understand or believe like you do. You can only present information. And if that ends up convincing them, then yeah, they'll be like you. But you can't force them to believe something. Nobody can. This is a mistake of Watchtower. They're so paranoid and unchristian. They force people to believe things that are not only clearly wrong, like 1914 and their appointment in 1919, right? There's obvious lies, totally unrelated to anything explicit in the Bible, right? Just misapplications of prophetic text and chronology. They'll totally condemn you if you don't believe that and you were one baptized into them. They'll shun you forever. You're out of here, right? They literally have given their entire spiritual lives to people who have lied to them in God's name for decades, over a century, about this 1914, 1919, great, all this stuff. Okay, we're not going to convince them. It's over. Some of them, maybe. Usually when they fall away from Watchtower, it took me several years to come back around. I had to convince myself of God first and then just go through the whole history and thought, and I thought, okay, yeah, no, that's all still true. It's just these guys are nuts, right? A lot of people in Watchtower don't care about any of that stuff, right? It's hoping they can slide in at the last second, right? And, be viewed as approved because they support these false teachers and liars. So they're often just selfish people who would turn on you in a second. Literally go from loving you and smiling and hugging you to absolutely rejecting you as garbage. Over 1914. Or great crowd stuff, right? Anointed, 4,000, 19, all that stuff, right? Just this non-biblical set of lies that they've all succumbed to, right? We're not going to convince them. You try to spend time with people who are committed to Watchtower, it's going to drain you. They may agree with you on one God the Father. Divine. They don't even care enough about the divine name to change the pronunciation. All they care about is arguing Trinity. If Watchtower people are being friendly with you and you're not Watchtower, it's because you don't believe in Trinity. That's it. Then you're kind of pals until the other stuff comes out. Second, you don't agree with them, out of here, right? It's all or nothing with Watchtower people, basically. Some are a little more open, right? Especially some around here. But the fact is, you're not gonna change that. It's gonna frustrate you. You're gonna lose your strength. And then when you lose your strength, right? This is another illustration we'll get to another time about the oil, right? The virgins sharing their oil. You're not gonna have enough oil. These are things that as Christians, if you don't understand, you're going to end up spending a lot of your strength and time with people who don't care. It has nothing to do with them understanding. No, they don't care. That's what I've been telling you this whole time since the start of the show, basically, right? Our whole discussion of Trinity, divine name, Watchtower, all these things, examples, contrasting it with us, word for word, beliefs of the text. We got to watch ourselves. We got to make sure of all things. We got to watch ourselves most of all, right? We could fall victim to the very things we're telling others that they're falling victim of. And then be hypocrites. So this is critical, right? If we lose this, we're finished. If we lose our oil, another illustration we'll get to, like I referenced a moment ago, we're finished. Right? If our light gets set under a basket, well, we're not finished. No, we can actually put the light up on the stand and correct ourselves. But if we lose our strength, right? If we lose this, and the description of what happens here is totally different from what happens there with the light. All right. Now let's go to Mark, more on this salt, right? Next text on salt is in Mark. And this is where Jesus, in Mark 9:49, he says, "For everyone must be salted with fire." Salt is fine, but if ever the salt loses its strength, with what? And you season it itself loses its strength with what? And you season it itself. Have salt in yourselves and keep peace between one another. In fact, we're going to go to the Bible Hub. That reading NWT with what? And you, that doesn't look correct. Either there's something wrong with this version or NWT isn't correct. Again, sometimes the version I'm using is a little off, but it's usually discernible. So let me go ahead and bring up Bible Hub, though, so that we can make sure. Mark 9:49. We'll just read it there so it's very clear. I don't want an unclear rendering or potentially distorted in the version I'm using, the text version I'm using. So let's just do Bible Hub on this one. Mark 9:49. Everyone will be salted with fire. Let me see. Make sure we get the Greek in there as well, but I want to make it, that's good. Everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. Now that's more, isn't it? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. We go back to NWT. With what and you season itself, have salt in yourselves, keep peace between one another. If we go back to Matthew 5, you are the salt of the earth. If it loses its strength, how will it be restored? So in Mark, we have a little bit more, right? We have this whole salted with fire. And then we get what's similar to the Matthew reference, Matthew 5. Except for this part, right? Have salt in yourselves, keep peace between one another. That's important to not lose the strength, right? Questions, arguing, debates, these things never produce peace. They're like the opposite of peace, right? The whole point of a debate. So it should be in a context, really, a question where you've got to prove something, or you're someone who doesn't understand something. You're wasting your time with people who do understand. Remember the quote we read earlier from the Little Shaman, narcissism. It's not that they don't understand. They won't understand. They've heard it all before. If unless they're new, right? If you're new and you're getting a lot of this stuff, like even Trinity, right? If it's new, that's totally understandable. That's why we do these videos and talk about it. It's okay for you to have those questions. You should. And there's stuff out there, it's confusing for people. But if you've been doing this a long time and you've never learned, you're never figuring it out, well, then it's not the information. No information's going to work. It won't ever work. You don't want to understand it. Or you might disagree. But when you ask, right, when people ask questions, it's one thing to say, hey, I disagree because of, right? Well, then you have a belief that's actually founded on information you've come to accept. Whereas when you just ask a question and you don't even know what you believe, if you believe it, well, you're just destabilizing other people who already believe something. You're just projecting, right? You're just projecting your own insecurity about your lack of belief on others who don't have that condition. You're not a new person who genuinely doesn't understand and you don't have the info. You have all the info. You just don't want to believe it. Similar with Trinitarians and non, right? They may say that about us. Maybe. Our beliefs are pretty, clear though, right? So I talked about before. Well, I can put right to them. It's word for word, right? So you have to say, well, it doesn't mean what we're saying it means. And that's the problem with Trinitarians usually and others. But still, it's not usually the information, everyone. And that can be frustrating for us. It can make us lose. It's like we spend a lot of time, right? Like I was saying earlier, I spent a lot of time dealing with Sam, and I think a lot of it was important, had to be done from my perspective, but maybe not all of it, or maybe even any of it, right? Whether I believe it or not, it wasn't producing a praiseworthy return on my investment. I was giving a lot of my time and emotion and physical output to addressing something in someone that we had already reached a point where it was done. Now, I think ultimately, though, again, it was something we achieved beyond what we expected. But outside of that unique circumstance, typically, you don't achieve that kind of mutual understanding with people. And even with Sam, it's not like we're totally on the same page. We're just we're done, or at least I am. And I think we're not going to expend that. I'm not going to expend my deep energy and spiritual strength going over and over again things having to do with Sam or these doctrinal points, that whether they're related to his views or not. Some I will, and we have series, and I'm not going to stop teaching the Bible or even refuting people I think are wrong, including Sam. But I'm not going to spend that much. You understand? Sam required an unusual degree of attention and time and focus because of how much he was doing. So in order to somewhat correspondingly deal with it, in my view, I felt, okay, I have to do a little more here to establish, that there's something, in my view, going on with Sam and his diet and all this stuff. But I, after it all, can say that apart from what we ultimately may have achieved, it wasn't really the best use of my strength, It didn't really help me keep peace a lot. But again, we did sort of achieve a peace. So I'm not totally everything was for nothing. No, it could have been, and in many ways was, but not ultimately. We at least achieved some level of mutual respect, which is important because people watch us. Right? We don't make Christianity look very good when we attack each other, even if we're right. Makes us look like we can't figure things out, which is terrible. But again, like we talked about earlier, right? We can't always help people. That's just not always going to happen. We are where we are. We have to deal with what we have, and not get overly caught up into thinking that we're failures or other people are, unable to see what we're seeing. No, we've explained it. They see it. They don't believe it. Either they just don't believe it the way we do, or they don't want to. One of the two, usually. And if it's one of the two, it's not going to change until they decide to. We can't make them change. We can't repeat it in any other more refined and precise way. Not usually. If you can, great, go for it. If you've already done it, it's like, this is it right here. And then they still don't? Okay. Well, where are you going to end it? Right? Where are you going to preserve your strength for someone else? Something else. You just keep going and you're not going to have it. You don't have it to give. You're just going to come and suck it away from other people to go give it to other people so that you can keep arguing with them, right? That's not helping anybody, not even you, whoever you may be. And that's everybody, including me, if we can't shake ourselves from losing our strength. We can't do that. We're finished, right? He said that earlier. We're good for nothing. I don't want to be good for nothing, right? I mean, if I'm a light sometimes it's a little dark, well, I can fix that. Put on the lampstand. This salt, though, we've got to watch it. We've got to watch it, right? We lose our strength. How are we going to get reseasoned, resalted, re-oiled? According to the illustration here and the one about the oil and the lamps, we'll get to another time, there's a limit. Right? Jesus isn't just going to come along, the Holy Spirit, and restore everything. No, there's a point where if we cross this, we could damage ourselves. So obviously it's not desirable. Let's see what else we get from this salt before we'll wrap it up here in a moment, everyone. Thank you for joining me. We'll take a look at the chat in a moment, and then we will partake. And we'll wrap it up. I may be doing a show tomorrow, so look for the notice. In Luke chapter 14, Jesus says, salt, to be sure, is fine, but even the salt loses its strength. But if even the salt, loses its strength, with what will it be seasoned? Verse 35. For the split screen. It is suitable neither for soil nor manure. People throw it outside. Let him that has ears listen, right? It's very similar to Matthew 5. You lose your strength like the salt. If it loses its strength, it's not suitable for anything, not soil or manure, right? People just throw it. It's done. There's no recovery here. You can't just pull the basket over off the light and now everyone can see. You lose your strength as the salt, it's over. Let him that has ears listen. This is very important, right? It's not like minor. We have to be able to determine whether we're losing our strength, right? Whether we're extending ourselves, as I have done at times and then caught myself like I was describing. We have to be able to do that because it's going to happen. We will find ourselves at times, whether it's dealing with someone or some issue or something at work or in life, getting too involved in ways where our strength is starting to dissipate, right? We need to be able to stop it at a point where we don't lose it. We don't totally exhaust our spiritual strength, our ability to have peace with each other, right? And with the earth on some level. We saw that earth reference in Matthew, and then we saw in Mark how it talked about having peace among ourselves, being our salt. Well, we're not going to have that if we're arguing, asking questions. Belief is what brings that about, right? Belief and acceptance doesn't mean we have to accept every single thing and believe it the same way. The Bible tells us, we have to individually account for what we choose to believe to God and Jesus, not to each other. Unless it's something sinful, right? Like Matthew 18 stuff. Otherwise, we should be trying to build each other up. Focus on the things we do believe in. How can we better our community, our world? If you don't get involved in politics, fine. Don't get involved with people who don't do that. Don't make it hard for them. Find the people who do, if that's what you do and you think it's helpful in some way that's consistent with the Bible and being a Christian. Not everyone does. So find the ones that do and then work with the other ones who don't on other things. Right? As long as we accept the core beliefs together and we're not going to make it hard for each other, doctrinally or otherwise, we should be able to work together and get things done. All right. Gracious, it was just the rest of the references to salt in the New Testament. We're going to go to the account, though. Right? So this whole preserving, right? You are the salt of the earth. Talked about that in Matthew 5. And then in Mark 9, Jesus talked about how we can have salt in ourselves by having peace among ourselves. And then in Luke, we also saw that if you lose your strength, like in Matthew 5, it's gone, right? You're not good for nothing, not manure, right? They can throw you out. So this is a big deal. It's something we have to preserve at all costs. No, we don't owe anybody anything but love, right? We all know that. Now, we want to try to help people get to marry where we can help in whatever way. True. We're not here to take from each other. We're not here to take each other's strength. We're not here to take each other's oil. We're here to preserve our oil and preserve our strength and help others do the same or get strong by developing it themselves, by responding, right? They either respond or they don't. We can't make them do it. It's true. We read it earlier from Little Shaman. We've read it from the biblical accounts, right? Even right here. We're going to read the account, then we're going to wrap it up in Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? Lot's wife. They were told, don't turn around. We're going to destroy the city. It's wicked. You know that. Fire's coming down. She turned around. You cannot change people. You can't make them thinking. Not even the angels, not even Jah, and he won't. Yeah, of course he could totally control you and force you. He doesn't do that. Right? Even when he's predicting things, kind of leads to the predestination we'll get to another time. He just looks to see what you're thinking and then takes advantage of it, right? He can, like if he sees a nation that would desire the riches or treasures of another and he wants to punish Israel, he'll just show the ruler of that nation, right? He'll direct the ruler's attention, like the Bible describes, to Israel. Yeah, go look at them. Go get that. You cannot ever deceive or get away from Yahweh, right? But then it's you choosing it, right? It's the rule of the nation choosing to do it. He's just showing you. He's just opening your eyes to it. So Jah doesn't have to control you. He can just show you what you're not looking at. And then watch you, he knows you're going to react. He knows what's in your heart, right? So he sees things on a whole nother level. Or he can choose not to and let you choose to do things and then punish or reward you accordingly, right? So we have Lot here. We have the whole account of Lot, right, that we've read many times. We're going to wrap it up, everyone. So we already know what happens, right? The city, the wife, all of it. We have actual remnants of the city. And we have gigantic sulfur pellets embedded in the remaining structures. It's online. I've done a video about it. You can look it up and see it for yourself. But let's focus on what would be a way in which we preserve the earth, right? Going back to Matthew 5, the original account where Jesus says, you're the salt of the earth. The salt loses strength. What's going to happen? It's going to be thrown outside. How are we the salt of the earth? We know how we can have salt among ourselves, have peace among ourselves. Mark chapter 9, Luke 14. But how can we be the salt of the earth? Is that the same thing? Well, one way in which we're clearly the salt of the earth, it's not just a Christian thing, but it has to do with God's people, right? Why is the earth here in the first place? The way that it is, right? With all the wars and destruction, excuse me. It's because it's here being preserved until God changes it through his judgments. It's only this way for a time. And then the condition of the earth will reflect something different. So, in that sense, if Jesus says you're the salt of the earth, we're helping preserve the earth from God's wrath. Initially, with the people after Adam and up to the time of Abraham and Moses, those whom God chose and used, like Noah, right? Noah's another example. Noah helped preserve the earth of his time, right? Because the whole earth was all thinking bad according to the Bible, except Noah, right? He found favor in God's sight. So he preserved the earth to the point where then Noah, talked about Gobekli Tepe earlier, right? All that stuff. The waters, all this stuff underneath the earth. Noah helped preserve the earth by finding favor in God's sight, leading him to continue through the human line from Adam and bring forth the Messiah. In the same way, after that time, the Bible describes how in Genesis 18:20, consequently, Jehovah said, the cry of complaint about Sodom and Gomorrah, yes, it is loud, and their sin, yes, it is very heavy. I'm quite determined to go down that I may see whether they act altogether according to the outcry over it that has come to me. And if not, I can get to know it, right? So right here, we can see that while God can get to know anything, just like with Adam and the names or the things that he did, the animals, he allows things to happen in ways that he then goes and finds out when he wants to. Or like, we talked about before, he'll just leave you on your own and let you come to your own end, if he chooses. Either way, the complaint came loud before him with Sodom and Gomorrah. So he went down there. Just like they went down the Tower of Babel, spent an undefined period of time there speaking with the people and confusing their languages. Just like today when we have all these messages and programming thrown at us by the people in our societies, changes our thinking, changes the way we talk, right? Becomes trendy. Well, they're much more sophisticated, and during a time like that, where they were able to, over a period that we don't know, divide up humankind. And we have language datable to that time, which is consistent with what happened, is described. So here we see something similar. They go down, they find out, and they can influence things or decide, okay, yeah, this place is this way or that way. So they turned their way and they went to Sodom. And then it says, Abraham approached and began to say, will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous men in the midst of the city. Will you then sweep them away and not pardon the place for the sake of the 50? who are inside of it. And then Jehovah said, if I shall indeed find in Sodom 50 righteous men in the midst of the city, I will pardon the whole place on their account. Right? So it's just like with today. We might see places on the earth, cities even that we're in or travel in, and they're like terrible in some ways, full of crime and violence and all these immoral behaviors. If there's a small number of people in that location, no matter how bad it is, right? We're talking Sodom and Gomorrah here, right? Sodomites. Ooh. So, sexually perverted abusers. And nonetheless, Jah is loving, and he understands the condition we're in, and he will preserve. Right? Just like salt and its preserving qualities. We were going to read a little bit more about it earlier. I was going to bring up some studies and things, but we all kind of already know. And more just repeat of scientific stuff that probably at this point we don't need to get into. It is basically what we already know, and the texts have made plain in some way that we preserve the earth, right? We can preserve peace among ourselves by being salt, and we can preserve the earth. We can also lose our strength like salt, and then it's over. It's worse than having our light under a lamp that we can, bring out and put on the lampstand. No, you lose your strength in terms of the salt, you got no use, not even manure, right? So it's a big deal because this is how powerful it is, right? It's very powerful. Look at what it allowed God to do with regard to the flood and Noah and the extent to which he endured the conditions of that time before he destroyed it, and then allowed sinful humans to repopulate the earth once again, just like we've done, and then deal with us the way we are and like they were in Sodom. He said, though, if he found 50, he would spare it. Abraham, he probably knew how bad it was. Please, here I've taken upon myself to speak to Jehovah where I am dust and ashes. Suppose the 50 righteous should be lacking 5. Would you for the 5 bring the whole city to ruin? This he said, I shall not bring it to ruin if I find there 45. And then Abraham goes on to say, what if I find 40? And then Jehovah says, I shall not do it on account of the 40. And then Abraham goes, what about 30? I shall not do it on account of the 30. He goes, what if there are 20? I shall not bring it to ruin on account of the 20. And then Abraham goes even further and says, what if there's 10? I will not bring it to ruin on account of the 10. Jehovah then went his way and finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. Now the 2 angels arrived at Sodom by evening, and Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot caught sight of them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the earth. Once again, proskuneo all the way down, face to the earth. 2 angels right there, very clear, boom. And he calls them my lords, right? There's nothing about Trinity here. We've already talked about it. We'll get back to this account another time as well, like we did with Zechariah. We're focusing on salt, preserving the earth. Preserving the earth that's sinful in ways that people often look to and say, why would God allow it? Why is this happening? Well, it's happening because of our choices and his allowance to try to save us in a way that ultimately judges us for the very things you're talking about. Very things you're criticizing God for allowing, he's allowing so that we can be judged for them and then ultimately be redeemed because we're the ones doing them, right? It's not him forcing us to do anything. He's often letting us do things in ways that disappoint him to the point where we then die. Yeah, because of the things we did, and then, we get judged, and the future generations are warned about it, and like we see here with Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So, but Lot, right? Lot ultimately got out of here, but they couldn't find 10. Now today we have many cities, and it seems like Jah was finding at least 10. So it's important for us as Christians to think of us, to think of ourselves, I should say, as salt in a way that not only can help preserve peace among ourselves by not constantly arguing or asking the same questions over and over, just so we can ask or argue with people who ask the same questions over and over, but instead build each other up. answer things that have to as they're brought up and they haven't been sufficiently covered. Otherwise, we need to be preserving our strength so that we not only don't become useless, but that we can also help other people. We can't maintain peace among ourselves, constantly asking questions and debating. No, won't happen. Every now and then, something important, yeah. Otherwise, no. And if you can't do that, you gotta go. Unless you're brand new, no. It's not the right thing. If we lose our strength, we're finished. And many of you have no strength to begin with. And it's not for us to force you to have strength, to force you to believe what we believe. All we can do is present information. The best we have. And if it convinces you, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. But what's not okay is for other people to expect that we have to constantly attend to their emotional or other instabilities and inabilities to believe the way we're believing, right? You can't force us to believe the way you're believing either. You might as well just knock it off. You've asked the question before, we've already answered. What's the point? If you don't care enough to even find out if we've answered, what's the point? You're not going to believe anyway. You don't even care enough to find out. So it's important, I think, because I've recently went through things, as I mentioned, and I've gone through them historically at times in different ways where we can easily lose our strength. We can get too involved in things that don't have peace as their objective. Don't involve trying to find righteous people who aren't perfect, but who are at least not trying to sodomize new people coming into the city. Or anybody for that matter, right? But hey, sodomites want to sodomize each other and it's legal. You go ahead and do that. You better make sure there's at least 10 people in your city who don't. I highly recommend it. Otherwise, you might reach a point where your city has a really bad day. With that having been said, let's go ahead and thank God the Father for everything he's done. And most importantly, for his Son, the only begotten one, came to the earth and lived as a man and gave his life so that we, as humans, born in the likeness and sinful state of Adam, can have life again by belief in the things Jesus did and trying to live our life in the same way. So we partake of the bread that he used during the Passover to represent his body. And we use the wine to represent his blood. We believe by doing this, we fulfill our obligation as Christians, according to John 6 and elsewhere, to show our faith in him, to accept his sacrifice on our behalf, so that we can have a relationship with God the Father, and we can be forgiven for the sins that we commit, and hopefully help preserve peace among ourselves and in the earth for as long as we live. Let me go ahead and just take a brief look at the chat and make sure everything's going okay. See if there's anything that we might be able to find out. Or at least see how you guys are doing. Looks like you all had a good time. Oh, don't worry about it, Ricky. We can talk about predestination another time. We talked about a little. I would encourage you, watch that Maury debate, watch the other link video, and then tomorrow I think I will do an open session. so we can maybe talk about a little bit more, okay? And otherwise, looks like you all had a great time. Sorry I couldn't get into some of your comments or questions, but I will be back tomorrow for another video. I'll put up a link. So if you have more you want to say and interact with, that would be a good time. I think we've reached basically the 2-hour limit. I try to keep these 2. So with that having been said, thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful evening, and may Jah bless you in Jesus.